Look, my bitches all bad, my niggas all real. I ride in dick in some big tall hills, big fat checks, big large bills, run out flip like 10 car wheels. Cold ass bitch, I give raw chills. 10 different looks and my lips all kill. I kiss them in the mouth, I feel all grills. Heat in the car, that smells on wheels. Woo! I was born to flex, yes. Diamonds on my neck. I like boarding jets, I like more than sex. But nothing in this world that I like more than checks. Money. All I really wanna see is the money. I don't really need a D, I need the money. All a bad bitch need is money. I got bands in the coop, bustin' out the roof. I got bands in the coop. Touch me, I'll shoot. Bow, shake a little ass. Money. You get a little bag and take it to the store. Money. Get a little cash. Money. You shake it real fast, you get a little more. I got bands in the coop, bustin' out the roof. I got bands in the coop, bustin' out the roof. I gotta fly, I need a jet. Shit, I need room for my legs. I got a baby, I need some money. Yeah, I need teeth for my egg. All y'all bitches in trouble. Bring brass knuckles to scuffle. I heard that Cardi went pop. Yeah, I did go pop, pop. That's me bustin' that bubble. I'm the Sonny with the drip, baby mommy with the clip. Walk out bodies with a bitch. Bring a thotty to the whip. If she fine or she thick. God damn.
We live in trying times indeed. We live in an era where social media dominates our daily lives more than the news media. I find this disturbing. Like recently, I hate to bring this up, but recently, a woman, an actress, has been outed as an abuser in a relationship with a equally, if not infinitely more successful actor with decades of experience. But none of his overtures or his insistence that he had been abused was vetted by the mainstream media and social media in large. For the most part, it was a small minority of people in this guy's corner, and things seem to have turned around karmically. Yeah, I'm referring to the Me Too era that we're currently in. It's a weird gender-based form of McCarthyism that disturbs me to the core of my being, and it should to anybody out there with common sense, male, female, or parts in between. So I was just thinking, I'd add to my catalog of episodes by talking about some issues that I have. And the issue I have is the whole Believe Women movement. I hate that believe the victims. They just call them victims. But I have a problem with this whole believe the person right off the bat with no physical evidence or no due process. And earlier I had made an episode and I called it the Fair Sex. It detailed a story a story from my past where I was crushing on a woman and I went to shoot my shot, and the angels above decided to give her a bit of a conscience, and she stopped me from shooting my shot by telling me who she really was in no uncertain terms. All the warts and creases plainly visible after she finished talking. I forego that experience, but stupidly, being a young man at the time and shit with needs, I would make more mistakes that I would document later. But today I'm going to tell a different kind of story. It's going to be in the vein of the Fair Sex, but it's going to be really, really different and whatnot. I think I want to call this thing, I'm going to call this episode a kind of short double episode. I'm going to call this one Lolita. Yeah, I'm going to call it Lolita. And take what you want from that. But it's not what you think. Many years ago, and I'd say This is in the real early 80s. I was a kid. This is the 80s. I was a kid. And I grew up in the south side of Chicago. And as we know, Chicago is FUBAR. As a matter of fact, it's so FUBAR that whenever I was out for summer break, my parents would not hesitate to send me and my siblings out of town to one of two southern or rural destinations to ensure that we didn't get in any trouble during the summer, and also to take a little bit of a vacation themselves because they deserved it. Well, this particular summer in the 80s, early 80s, this particular summer, I was shipped to Mississippi. And I think it was about a week or so, maybe 2 weeks, a little bit more. But my dad had driven us down there, and he dropped us there, and he'd gone on to other greener pastures. And the idea was that he was supposed to come back and drive us back across country because it was a road trip. Pretty much once we got out of school for that year, it would be a road trip back and forth, you know, with a vacation in a rural farm area is that's our vacation. So this particular time, when the time came for us to come back to Chicago, my father hadn't returned. Instead, we had some distant relatives. They were described as distant relatives. It was a guy, what I assume was his wife, and a daughter. And I was told they were our cousins from the East Coast. I don't know if there's Jersey or New York, but they were driving something like an Oldsmobile, like a big car, like kind of like a Lincoln Continental, 70s car, a pimp mobile, as some racists would say back in the day. So we have a grown adult man who I've never seen before in my life, a female that could either be the guy's older daughter or wife, and a kid that was his kid. And this is important because it was like me and my sister, and we were going to ride a couple 100 miles back to Chicago with this family that we didn't know from seeing, but had a swimming endorsement from my unseen father. And my grandparents seemed to know who they were. So, I didn't think anything was wrong. So we pile into the car, and we don't have modest, we just have like a little suitcase and everything. So everything's piled in like thick in this car. And I get in the back seat. I'm sitting, my older sister sitting on one side of this behind the driver's seat, and my female cousin is sitting on the other side of this, the passenger seat. I'm in the middle of this car. It's like an automatic. And I want to describe the girl. And the best way I can describe her is, if anyone's ever seen that movie, What's Love Got to Do with It? The picture detailing Tina Turner's life, the fictionalized account of Tina Turner's life and her abuse by the hands of Ike Turner. In the movie, Ike Turner has a first wife before Tina Turner who tries to kill herself before Tina ends up in the hot seat. And this girl reminded me of that woman. She had a weird demeanor about her. She was like a light-skinned girl, a couple of shades, well, not like milk color, but just like not a red bone, but somewhere in between. And she had like brown hair, long brown hair, and she had like weird looking dead eyes. And it wasn't Down syndrome dead. It was just like some kind of static look in her face. And I talked to her, and she was pretty much non-responsive, so I didn't know if she was special or not. So it was just awkward sitting between her and my older sister on this trip. And, I kind of dozed, and we finally made it. And here's the catch. When we got back to Chicago, instead of taking us home, these relatives took us to another relative's house. And we were told that my dad would pick us up from there. So I'm like, okay, whatever. I knew these relatives. And I got the car, and they piled out the car, and they were going to take a little rest stop and hang out with the relatives. And when I got out the car and we got our luggage out, I noticed there was this little dark-skinned girl hanging around my other uncle's house, the house that we were at. It's like some skinny girl. I want to give you an idea. I'm a grade school kid at this time, and these girls are a grade school kid, and they're probably like a year under me. So, no big deal, right? So they pal out. The girl is still non-responsive, everything, but I noticed that her and the dark-skinned girl are getting along famously. So I'm just like, well, whatever. Maybe she just didn't like me or whatever. I think it's weird too. I thought she was weird too. So I just, I'll just lump it. It's no big deal. Now I'm gonna wait for my dad to come get me and my sister, and it's a nice house and everything. And they had like a day room in the basement, like a rec room. So I say, hey, I got nothing to do. There's adults here. My older sister don't want nothing to do with me. She's a teenager. So I go down into the basement and start playing pool. There's a pool table down. So I started playing pool. I wasn't really a good pool player, but I understood the whole hitting the ball in the hole thing. Let's put it that way. I'm down there playing, having a good old time. It's a nice little, it's like a whole nother house under there. It's like a pool. It's like a rec room with a TV and couches and everything and a bar. Then there's like where the pool table is and some other little games. There's like a bedroom down there. One of my cousins used to sleep down there before he moved out. So I'm like down there playing, and I hear the girls coming, both of these girls, and they're like just playing, and it's like little kids playing, right? They're just like running and screaming. I don't think nothing about it because I'm about a year or so older than them. I'm not saying I'm any more mature, but it's just they want nothing to do with them. They come downstairs and they start chasing each other around the pool table while I'm playing. So I just said, I'm gonna ignore them. So they're playing, they're running around the tabletop speed, screaming and doing all this shit. I didn't say nothing. I glanced over. So right in the middle of them running around, one of them literally grabs my ass. Yeah, I'm a guy. One of these girls grabs my ass, and it's not a pinch. It's like getting the whole thing. It's like stealing a piece of chicken. So I look over and this dark skinned girl grabbed my ass. I'm like, hey, what the fuck's wrong with you? I'm like, hey, get your hands off. So I go to swat her hand away, and this other girl that's supposed to be a distant relative of mine, she gets the other half in the same fashion. And I'm like, hey, what the fuck wrong with you? We cousins. And they're just laughing. They're laughing, right? So I go, like, I turn towards them. I have like a pool stick in my hand. I say, hey, what the fuck is going on? They both start screaming this loud falsetto scream, like, ah. And then I'm like, hey, I like backed off with the pool cue. And then they start laughing and doing the same shit, running around the table and trying to grab me and shit. So I'm like, hey, what the fuck's wrong with y'all? And it becomes apparent that they're gonna try to do something. So I'm like, hey, look, I don't play that shit. You want y'all go play somewhere else and leave me alone. And they didn't give a shit. And they kept trying to grab me. And it was just, I felt so powerless. Yeah, me too. Believe victims, right? Yeah, I felt so fucking powerless, right? At one point, one of the girls started snatching at the pool cue in my hand. And I'm like, hey, what the fuck's wrong with you? And they're snatching away. And so I get into a tug of war with one of the girls who was pulling on this pool cue. And while I'm pulling on it, the other girl tried to grab my crotch. So I'm like, hey, that's enough, right? And they just started screaming and the shit, and they would quiet down and still start doing it. So I tried to get out of there. And they're trying to block me from leaving and shit. And I'm like, I get the impression they're trying to herd me to the like back room or something. And I get out of there and go upstairs to the backyard where all the adults are. And I didn't know what to say. When I got up there and I saw the adults there bullshitting around, like, having, it's like kind of like some shit like Memorial Day or something, sitting back there with a barbecue grill and, bullshitting around and some goddamn oldies music. My older sister's just sitting there chilling, waiting sullenly for my dad to show up. And, I just like, I didn't know what to fucking do. And then they just like, hey, how you doing? Hey, what's up? So I just sat down in the backyard. I knew I couldn't go in that house because they would go in there waiting for me. And a few moments later, both girls came up and started hanging out in the backyard and were lurking around the corners, eyeballing me. And I just like played it off. And eventually my dad came to pick me up. I never told my sister about that. I should have told my older sister. Maybe she could have done something to help me. But my dad came and picked me up, and I was just weirded out. And I've always been weirded out about that. I've always been weirded out about that all these years. And I just wanted to bring that out, and share it because it is fucked up. And even more fucked up is the fact that I don't even know if these people are like even our relatives or just some friends of my father. Obviously he had taken us down south, and we had our vacation, And maybe these were just some friends he had that he was going to pay them to just drive us up there. And then he was going to pick us up and, fake to my mom like he had drove us back or something. I never knew. But it's just something that's been on my mind for years. And I just always wondered what happened to that girl, if she's a nut job or anything. That little black girl. And I was like, man, I felt like clocking them. I honestly felt like when you're doing that, at one point, I just felt like just taking that poo and just laying it across their heads. But whatever, I was a victim. And you can't say that when you're a guy, right? You can't say a shit. Nobody would believe me. Even if I went up and when I looked at the adults in the backyard and I told them that shit, they would have somehow skewed it back towards me. Like, oh, well, you can't be messing around with them girls. And I'm like, no, it's not like that. And I didn't even want to go through that. And I knew enough about that shit instinctively that I didn't say anything. And I never have until now. And that's part one of this little episode.
What up, D-Mac?
Now, for the second part of this little broadcast of this episode, we're going to move ahead from the early 80s to approximately the summer of 1987. I remember it well because I had recently graduated from high school. And like most people in the Chi-Town, especially the south side of Chicago during that time, we were perpetually out of work. Not for a lack of trying, though, as I would find out later. We were out of work and lazing about before fate would take us where it had to take us. And for me, that would mean a short trip to Columbia College in the fall, sometime around October. But that's not the point of me telling this story. It was like summer, and I recently graduated from high school and somehow managed to get through all of those 4 years without getting laid, which is not so much of a jump considering I was what you'd call a hybrid nerd. I appeared to be a nerd, but I would fight people to the death if I had to. So it made it problematic that when people were bullying me, but they somehow managed to get along, famously cramming me into that preconceived box. So be that as it may, I had my V card way intact. Even getting a little heckling from my own father, but I debunked that famously later. Well, I was hanging around with my cousins, and I had a cousin that was my age who had recently graduated as well. Sullen type of fellow, kind of quiet, plays cards close to the vest where I was concerned, but not where others were concerned. And we had a younger cousin who was about 4 years younger than us. And this guy was like a neighborhood Casanova. He was just getting in and out of women like you wouldn't believe. I mean, I'm serious about that. This guy was a little Lothario, little light-skinned guy, rocking a Jerry curl. And so I spent a lot of time over there because they were my peers. They were, it was like having two brothers because I had two female siblings. I was the Jan Brady of that group. So every chance I got, I was kicking back. I was kicking it over at my cousin's house. And on top of that, we had a visitor from the South another 18-year-old boy. He was light skinned. He was a light skinned version of me, and it was a complete culture shock. Just imagine a light skinned nerd who's built like a professional baseball player and acts like Jeffro Bodine from the goddamn Beverly Hillbillies. Literally, this guy was wearing like, it's just where like he was showing off his physique, and he had some high waters on, cuff high waters and penny loafers. Like some, like some Michael Jackson shit from that Beat It. He was had his pants like that, and it was just weird. Everybody that saw him would, trip out on him, but he didn't seem to care. He was the total okie, but he made it work. And I was a straight man, unfortunately. Well, this summer was cool. We were gonna try to find out what life had to offer. Me, I was hoping to at least find some kind of female hookup or companionship or something. Just talk to a goddamn female, to fight this whole nerd thing they had going on. And it's pretty cool. We was hanging out over there, and they had little friends over there and everything. And my younger cousin, he was still running through a couple of females here and there, and exploring his aspirations of being a future NBA basketball player. You know, so we spent the summer playing basketball and running around. Going to the mall. Other little adventures. They were hilarious. And I remember one particular day. I think it was like a Thursday or a Friday, like around the early part of June. We were over there and we decided to go play like some softball. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'm not really a sports guy, but all the guys over there was like about enough guys to play a full, make two teams to play a softball. We went to a vacant lot and we were hanging out there. We were playing. And I was mostly just standing to the side, but I was playing too. And the other guys, the B team was out on the field, and we were the ones batting. And I remember that this young girl was about my younger cousin's age, showed up with her friend. Well, I think it's her cousin, like some dark skinned girl, skinny girl, like the one I mentioned in the earlier segment. She showed up, and they showed up with a third person, and this third person was probably the hottest girl I had ever seen at that time. Like really outside of my own school, because there's a couple of like standouts there too. But this girl showed up, and I don't know, she was a light skinned girl with maybe green eyes, very light skinned, kind of Mariah Carey type, and she was just built. She was built like a woman. She looked like she was in her 20s, and she was thick as hell. And she was wearing like some little shorts and a t-shirt, and everything was just out like bam, Everybody was just looking at it. Time just stopped on that damn baseball diamond, that makeshift baseball diamond that we made. And everybody was just looking at her, and this chick was just soaking it in. She was soaking it in, man. She already knew that she was commanding the spot. And she took a port on a little brick wall or something right behind the umpires, where where we were batting it. She started court right there, and some other girls were there too, just hanging out. And I remember just like I couldn't stop staring at her because she was just stunning. And everybody was just playing the game. The game resumed some kind of way. Playing the game. A lot of guys trying to impress her, trying to hit home runs and stuff. And it got to be my turn. And I went up to the plate to bat. And I just couldn't. I kept looking over my shoulder at her. And I think she took notice of it. And the guy threw the ball, and like I had like two strikes. And then they were like, "Hey, hit the ball, man, hit the ball." So like I went to hit the ball, and I like hit it, and it just fell like a few feet away, like 3 feet away on the ground. And this female, I kid you not, this female, the first thing that I ever heard her say, she observed what I did, the fact that I hit the ball and it felt like 3 feet away, and she said, "Damn, you need some pussy real bad, man." And everybody just bust up laughing, and I just like an idiot. And that was like the first exposure to her. So I was just like, whatever. I'm just kicking it. And then like throughout that summer, she was just getting more and more prominent. A lot of guys started hanging around in the area that we were in because she was standing across the street with her, right across the street from where my cousins lived in this building. She was standing right across the street there with her family. And a lot of guys would just start hanging around. It just got really busy over there just because she was around, and word got out that like what she looked like and everything. So you just had guys, droves of guys walking through there and shit. And they were standing. It's like kind of like a brownstone building. It's like a 3-story. So they're on the side of the building. You can look up and see. You can look up and see like their apartment window, and the girls would be up there messing around like a bunch of girls that would be up there with the windows open and playing music and stuff. I remember that because they kept playing like "Love's a House" by Force MDs. You know, that shit was just blowing up, and it was just weird because it was just weird because a lot of guys were on the outside street trying to look up there and see her with no clothes on or in her bra or something. They were just tripping. And this girl was just feeling herself. She was almost becoming insufferable. So after the initial shock of what she looked like and just checking her out, and this chick had like the most amazing like curves that you ever saw. Let's put it that way. And but her mind was like a thug. She had like a basic brain. She was like just like a basic chick in the head. And you couldn't really once you got past what she looked like, it just wasn't nothing else there. And she was just getting outrageous. There was a couple of guys in the area that were players, and they were coming around and hanging around trying to see her. And I remember this one day that there used to be this guy who was supposedly like this big player, like a P Diddy type guy, just a pimp or whatever. He was walking with this dark skinned sister. They were holding hands. They were almost wearing the same clothing. They were like a short set and matching short set or whatever. The girl was attractive. It was a dark, really attractive girl. So she was like standing up against a wall across the street from where we live. And the guy walked by with his girlfriend, and he stopped and glanced over at her. And I know he had seen her before. He stopped and glanced over at her, and she got up off the wall, took a couple of steps to him, and took his hand and pulled him away from his girl. And then the dark skinned girl was looking like, what the fuck, right? She was like, hey, what the fuck are you doing? And then he gave her, they had like a bag of food or something, like some White Castles or some shit. And he gave her the bag, and he had some napkins, and he threw the napkins at the dark skinned girl. And he said, you got your walking papers, so you could just walk. And I was like, that is the most scandalous shit, I've ever seen. Right. So the girl like ran away, the dark skinned girl. I was like, man, usually they beat your ass. I was like, man, you lucky and get your ass beat. And then the light skinned girl was like, I ain't worried about her. I'll fuck her up if she come over here. And I was like, yeah, that shit gonna come back on you, man. And she didn't care. And then right after the girl went away, the dark skinned girl went away. She just teased the guy to death, and she told him like, oh, I can't date. My parents don't let me date. Sorry. And then that guy was left with some blue balls, and he rightfully so. He was a bastard. He deserved that shit. Stay with me. So like I saw her do that shit. Then she did some other shit, just walking around showing off her ass and everything. And she had a mother who looked kind of like her, like an older version of her. But you rarely saw the mother. Mother would drive by and yell shit at her from the car, and they would talk. And she would drive off. We never made the acquaintance of the mother, but we could see from our vantage point that she was an attractive woman too. So it's no big deal. But I remember one day I was playing ball by myself in the alley with my country cousin. We was like messing around. I don't know what our other cousins was doing. I think they were grounded or something, but we could go outside because we wasn't, you know, we was just cousins. We could still do it. We were outside playing, and this chick was across the street, like loitering in the alley across the street for some reason. We was like, "Oh, this chick's just hanging out in the alley. Like, what the fuck is she doing, right?" And we were back on the opposite side of the street in our alley playing basketball. So we went up to her and we started talking to her, and she was just like bullshitting around, like talking to us, like, no big deal. But then she was like, hey, hey guys, I just want y'all to know I'm fucked up. And she alluded to the fact that she had been drinking something called Canadian Mist. It's a drink that, it's a Chicago drink, I guess. It's the equivalent of rock gut, over here. It's called Canadian Mist. You can look it up. It's, maybe some people listening to this actually drank it. It has a little bit of a kick. She informed us that she had been drinking heavily, and she proceeded to pass out in front of us. She killed over face first. This hot ass, this literal 10, and she would be a 10 in several states, including California. She killed over in front of us, right? There we are. We're looking at this hot ass chick passed out face down. Me and my cousin looked at each other and we just like, damn, I don't know what to make of this shit. There she is with her ass up in there, like passed out and shit. So I grabbed her arms and my cousin grabbed her legs, maybe vice versa. I can't remember at this time. We grabbed her fucking extremities, picked her big ass up. She probably weighed like 135 pounds or something. We walked her halfway around the building, down the block, around to where her building was. She had some keys or something. So we opened her door of the little brownstone and we put her in the lobby of that door and pulled the door up. And we put the key in the mail slot so it fell down by where her hand is. So she was like inside the door, passed out and shit right there. And we rang her doorbell for her cousin to come down and get her. So it's like, no big deal. So we walked back around the fucking corner and we saw a bunch of dudes run up on us, man. They was gonna fuck us up. And we was like, hey, what's up? And they was like, hey, why you put the girl in the door? I'm like, she was drunk and shit. That's why we just stuck her in there. They, no, you supposed to give us that girl. I'm like, man, your ass will go to jail. We told them there was some gangbangers and some sketchy dudes. So we told them, like, I guess we had good upbringing. We said, you'll go to fucking jail, man. You want to go to jail for rape and shit? You seen her mother? Her mother probably shoot your ass, man. And they was pissed off at us. And they was like, oh, y'all better stop hanging around here. We gonna put a hit on you. We're like, whatever. So I was like, whatever. And apparently, sometime after that, unknown to me, all of these guys had a powwow, and they had decided amongst themselves that she wasn't leaving that area before the summer's over without getting fucked. I'm seriously, all the players, all the young teenage players, had some kind of summit, and they decided that this chick was getting fucked before she got out of that area on general principle because all the havoc she was just wrecking. And I didn't think shit of it. And I recall a little bit after that, I was over my aunt's house on a Sunday. I was over there again, and I was sitting on the mailbox, and I saw her, hanging out, and she was just musing. She would always like get somebody to cop alcohol for her and shit, or she would be smoking. She was smoking like some Benson and Hedges, like chilling out right there. And I saw her, and she was like playing with her cousins who were like younger, like my younger cousin's age. She was like jumping rope and shit, and I thought it was the funniest thing to see this big 25-year-old looking woman jumping rope with some kids and shit. I thought it was fucking funny, And then I went about my business, but I looked out the window. I heard like some kind of commotion, and I looked out my window and I saw one of the players and her walking down the street together, like arm in arm, and her cousin was following behind her. And she turned around and yelled something at her cousin, but her cousin kept following. And then she told the guy to hold on, and she went and like just like uh, clapped the shit out of her cousin, her female cousin, the one who actually lived there. She clapped the shit out of her and made the girl run away, and then they went off about on their lonesome. So I was just like, oh well, I guess she gonna get fucked, because the dude, it was like, he was her male equivalent. The guy that was with her was her male equivalent. It was some light skinned ass dude, like a pookie, with a jerry curl and a Kango on. He had his short set on. He had, back in the day, people used to wear shit like these little fucking shorts. I never wear that shit because I think you look like a giant 10-year-old kid. You don't look like a man when you wear that shit, irregardless of the weather. I just wouldn't wear it. But you see like guys either like a t-shirt on, some fucking short set, and like some socks and like some Adidas or some Fila. And, accessorized, had like a fake Rolex on, some shit and a chain. And this guy had all that shit. He looked just like a fucking rapper or something. And she walked off with him somewhere to parts unknown. And I didn't see her for a while, So I was just like, well, maybe the bitch went home. And I was hanging out with some dudes, and I remember seeing that guy hanging out there. And I went over to see, they were talking in a little group, and I went over there like, oh, what you want? And I was like, whatever, And I noticed that the guy had what was supposed to be her panties in his possession. He was showing it to the other guys. He actually had the chick's panties. It was like some, blue sheer looking panties that some girl, 18-year-old girl would wear. Had like a little cartoon character on the back and shit. Now, honestly, it was a fucking Care Bear or something. But he had that shit. And it was just like, me and my cousin like, shit, man, that chick got fucked. It's like, man, I wish I'd seen that ass, That's all we could think, we're virgins and shit. We all thinking like, well, like, I wish I could have seen what her ass looked like with those panties. My cousin like, man, I'll tap that shit. I'm like, yeah, whatever. You ain't tapping nothing. But we went back and we were chilling that day. And one of the other like shiftless things that guys used to do back in the day, no job guys, either whether you're a pimp or not, or a nerd or a geek or thug, we pitch quarters. Yeah, you pitch quarters. It was a little gambling thing. We just pitch quarters, and that's the shit we were doing. So we were We actually was standing in front of I don't know, it just felt weird after we knew she got fucked. And the whole mood changed in the area. We don't know why, but we were about to find out. But we were pitching coins. I wasn't. I was kind of observing, so I was the nerd and shit. They didn't want to do nothing with me, but they were pitching. They were pitching quarters and shit outside all the players and shit, and kicking it. And one guy had like a joint and shit, or what he said was a joint. And he was taking puffs on it, and we was just kicking it. We was actually in front of where the girl lived, like on the side of the building that she lived in, like this brownstone or whatever. We're on the side street of that, doing our business. And this like car comes barreling around the corner. It's like a red car. I can't remember the make of it, but it's like 1987. So some shit like whatever, like the equivalent of a Honda Civic would be in that day. So the shit pulls up on like it turns around the corner, it barrels around and like hits the brakes real hard right in front of us. And these two fucking 30-year-old guys jump out and shit. And they pop the trunk, right? And we seen them, they were wearing like kind of red. So we knew they were like stones. But I guess if you were on the West Coast, it would be the equivalent of what you call a blood. Yeah, they jumped out and this dude had his trunk pop. And it's like they're like dudes, man. They're like in their 30s, man. One dude had a Jerry curl and shit, and he looked like mad as hell, man. He had like a Samuel Jackson look on his face. And they gathered all us up, man. They like each one of those guys went on each side of us. And one guy had his hand under shirt, so we don't know, Chicago and shit in the South Side. You ain't fucking with nobody. They got the drop on you. So they were like, get your ass on the wall. They made all the dudes get on the wall. These are some little kids, little boys out there. And they were walking down the line looking at us. We was like lined up on the wall. And they looked at my face and looked at some little kids. And they told me and my cousin, who was actually a Lothario, they told us to kick rocks and shit. They was like, get out of here. I was like, shit, okay. And then like we went a few feet and we looked back. And then it was like, hey, it's like, which one of you motherfuckers fuck that girl? Huh? Who fucking that girl? Yeah, who fucking that girl? Yeah, well, you guys think you cool or something? Like the one guy, the guy with the jury curl, he was like going off and shit. And he's like, hey, you think you cool? You think you'll get some pussy, man? Huh? And then the guy not the guy that actually fucked her, he was there. He was in the lineup. He wasn't saying shit. He was smart. But the guy that had fucked up with his dark-skinned girlfriend earlier, the guy that had fucked up, he made I don't know, I guess he was in his feelings about that he didn't get the pussy or something, and he got played and shit. He piped up and he said, oh, you just mad because you couldn't pull that old man? That's what he told this guy. And the guy grabbed him and started slapping him up and shit, like just the pummeling him and shit. Not in a man versus boy way, even though they're both, almost same body type and everything. But it's like a 30-year-old fucking around with an 18-year-old guy that just graduated from high school, just slapping him up and shit, like, jostling him. And his friend like eventually stopped him after a few minutes. He's like, hey, stop doing that. And then he said this shit. Here it comes. And you're pretty sure where this shit is going. He's like, hey man, that's my fucking daughter, man. And she's 14 years old. She's 14 motherfucking years old. Everybody like groaned and shit. Like, oh my God, what the fuck? That chick's 14? Say, yeah, that's my fucking daughter. Now fuck you up. You fuck my daughter. He's like, no, I ain't fucking your daughter, man. And that other dude that fucked her, who probably had the panties in his pocket, he was like 3 sheets to the wind, and he was like pale. He was like, shit. Right? He didn't say shit. And his boy didn't give him up. They were friends, man. And it was like, who fucked my daughter? And nobody ain't say shit. It was like real quiet as shit. And then the motherfucker was walking like back towards the trunk. Everybody, them dudes was like whimpering. They're like crying shit, like, oh shit, man. And then his friend's like, nah, don't do it right here, man. Don't do it. And then he came back and he said, hey, let me tell you little motherfucker something, man. Let me tell you niggas, y'all want some pussy? Y'all want to get your dick wet, man? Let me tell you something, boys. When you be fucking these girls, you playing with the power of God. You playing with the power of God. That's what he said. And then he he said some other shit, and then they just boned out in their car. And I ain't seeing them no more. We're just like, shit, man. What a revelation, right? It's like fucking 18 and shit. Them niggas over there, they was 18 and shit, couple of 16-year-olds, couple of 17-year-olds, and little kids. So we was just like, man, that chick was 14 and shit. And then when I just thought back to when I saw her jumping rope, I saw her fucking jumping rope with the little kids, and it made so much fucking sense. And then I thought about her walking away with the player guy. And it made so much sense. Her cousin was trying to rein her in, and she was like, "Hey, you getting out of pocket and shit. We kids, man. You can't do that. You can't go, to some guy's house and And she went to that guy's house and he busted her back out and shit, you know, and took her panties. So it was like shit, and I guess we ain't gonna see her no more. That's pretty fucked up. And I remember it was just quiet after that around there. Nobody was hanging out. It just got back to normal, you know. And then right before like September, like sometime near the end of August, we saw her one more time. She came over. Her mother was outside the car, was within reach of her ass. So she was like under heavy chaperone. But I saw them across the street from out my cousin's window. And she was dressed in age appropriate clothing, but she still looked like a 25-year-old woman. But I guess since she had fucked up and they had found out she got screwed or whatever, she got her virginity busted and all that shit or whatever the fuck happened. They put her in like kid's clothing, and it didn't make no difference. She still looked like a grown woman wearing like some, if you see a chick going to a Halloween party, you know. But she was wearing like some shit from J.C. Penney, and like she had on some fucking little collared socks that you see on a little kid, and like some fucking Mary Janes, and they still had these thick ass gams and a big old ass shit, and they're just like, that ain't helping. Y'all need to just send that bitch to like all girls school somewhere in a somewhere that shit you gotta be on a compound somewhere, and she in trouble. And that was all she wrote, man. That's the last time I saw her. But I heard later that she got hooked on drugs or something and had a bad time of it. I hope she's okay. But she was out of pocket. And that's what, like I told that earlier story about them kids fucking with me, the little girls fucking with me. And I told the story about this chick, this transformer chick pretending like she, it's like some fucking Amanda Bynes movie or some shit. She pretending that she a fucking adult when she a kid and shit. Look how this shit turned out. She was fucking fast. Those other girls were fast. I had no clue. And I had no clue when I was fucking 18, man. I feel good I had no clue. I maintained my innocence and shit, even as a fucking teenager on the cusp of adulthood. Yeah, it was crazy. That's fast girls, man. And who's the fairer sex? Who becomes sexually active first and sexually aware? It's mostly likely the girls. We gotta watch out for our sons. We gotta watch out for our little brothers. We gotta watch out for our nephews and our little cousins. We gotta put them on game, man. We need to tell them about this shit. We need to school them so they can be aware and make the best decisions, so they don't end up losing their livelihood. Don't end up losing their freedom. Don't end up fucking their minds up and shit with because when you're a kid and you get laid and shit, it changes you on so many levels. And you just have to guard against that. Maybe you can't stop nature from taking its course, but just give the kid a little bit of knowledge. We have to take back our community and shit every little way possible. And I'm not advocating a gender war by any means and shit, but I'm advocating good sense, good common sense, and make sure you take care of your kids. We got to go back to the old ways of watching our children very closely and training them and shit. Because I don't know what the fuck was going on with this chick. She looked like a woman. She looked like motherfucker, like a Mariah Carey clone or something. She could play her in a movie as a fucking teenager or something. I'm not even shitting you. If you would have seen this girl, ain't no way in the hell you would have thought she was 14. And we just tripping this shit. Once she told me that bullshit about I need to get some pussy or something, I was like done. I was like, well, fuck you. I don't mind looking, but fuck you. So you said that shit, you embarrassed me in public. I can't stand that shit. But those guys, she teased so many guys, and she did so much egregious weird shit and fucking with other girls around there and showing her ass and walking around with her booty shorts on with her butt cheeks hanging out and all that shit, that these guys got so mad that they made a pact that she was getting fucked before she left that area, and somebody closed the deal. One of the greatest of them closed the deal. And in the foreword, I want to tell you what happened to that guy that fucked her. He went to Mississippi for a year and a half after that. I guess he went home and copped to his parents about what he had done. And his ass was in Mississippi somewhere, like deep off in there, And he stayed and shit because his parents didn't want him to catch a case and go up for sexual assault, statutory rape. And that's what the deal. But she did go over his house, and he did say that she came over his house and he got her out of her clothes and banged her out, man. He got all what he could get off her. So he had her in there for a couple hours just railing on her shit. And we started fucking with him before Later that day when we found out what's happening, we was calling his ass Chester the molester and shit. We was just railing his ass. He lost all this cat shit and his supposed coolness and shit. And he's the select guy and all that shit. He was the select felon. Fucking idiot. So that's my stories. Just my little moral there, Make sure you keep your children close, male or female, because maybe this girl could have been something a little bit better if her mother was paying attention. So I would say her father was like maybe 32 or 30, between 32 and 36, and the mother looked somewhere like in her late 20s to mid 30s. And maybe they just didn't have time and shit. Maybe it's just still they're young too, having a fucking kid, and they didn't pay attention enough, or she wouldn't have been doing shit like that. But I feel proud that me and my cousin, when she passed out in front of us, dead away out in her skimpy little clothes. Me and my cousin didn't even think nothing of it. We carried her down to her house, opened her door, and put her inside the door and pulled the door up and locked it, and threw her keys through the mail slot so she wake up and get her keys so somebody could find her ass there. We're proud of that. And some guys were mad at us, but they should be thanking us. Anyway, just keeping it 100. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Just hit me up in the comments.